Hello, folks. For this week, we're going to be thinking about how Christianity becomes part of the Roman Empire, how it becomes favored by Constantine, and then we're also going to be thinking about a final iteration of discussions around Christology, looking at the Nestorian controversy and the Council of Chalcedon. So let's start thinking about how Christianity becomes a feature of the Roman Empire and how that changes Christianity itself. The big piece of this story is the conversion of Constantine to Christianity. Now, the context for this is at the end of the 3rd century, the Roman Empire was faced with multiple challenges. It had wars along many of its borders, whether with Persia to the east, with various Germanic tribes to the north. There was thus a need for greater administrative structure and taxation in order to handle these wars. And these newer religions are emerging, not just Christianity, but also Manichaeism, which was a dualist religion that came from the Persian Empire, and Mithraism, which was essentially a cult aimed at the Roman military itself. Christianity is really coming into its own as a cultural force by the end of the 3rd century. The appeal of Christianity is rooted in its organizational structure, that it can meet social needs that the Roman Empire is unable to meet in some regions. It has its own system of poor relief that is aiding people, and is ensuring that, in general, the welfare of fellow Christians is tended to. Increasingly, members of the Roman upper class are coming to Christianity, especially women, and that patronage network that they have helps Christianity find a foothold. So by the beginning of the 4th century, this Christian social network found in various cities and regions is beginning to rival the imperial administrative structure in terms of its reach and its effectiveness. Now, with all that said, we also then want to focus in on the person of Constantine. And for this week, you read the account of his life, or excerpts from that, by Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea's Life of Constantine. So I've posted a map on Populi that just shows the ways in which Constantine comes to eventually control all of the Roman Empire. But he starts way up in the far northwest. He is the general of the army in Britain, Roman Britain, located in the city of York, which if you look at the map is about as far north as you can get in the Roman Empire. And over time, he gradually takes control over Britain, over Gaul, over Spain. So that's essentially the western part of the Roman Empire. In 312, he fights the Tetrarch Maxentius. Tetrarch means someone who rules a third of something. So Maxentius is ruling the central third of the Roman Empire. He fights Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge near Rome, and that solidifies his control over the entirety of the western and central parts of the empire. So Constantine has a vision as he prepares for a battle at the Milvian Bridge, that if he worships the one supreme God, he will have victory. And he has a vision of a cross of light that we would now identify with the Chi Rho symbol in Christianity. That's what looks like the X and we'd say a P, perhaps. That's the first 2 letters of the Greek Christos. And he, in his vision, is told to put this image of the abbreviation for the name of Christ on the battle flags and shields of his men. And when he does, this is what gives him the victory over Maxentius. Now, although this is a moment of Constantine affirming the power of the Christian God, he does not publicly identify yet as a Christian after the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Yet, following this, in the year 313, he and Licentius, who is the tetrarch who controls the eastern region of the empire, issue an edict called the Edict of Milan. This is an imperial decree that gives Christians the ability to worship freely. It argues that Christians in their worship are no longer a threat to the state, but rather permitting Christians to worship freely will actually help ensure the security and success of the empire itself. And furthermore, the Edict of Milan decrees that Christians who have had their property seized or any possessions seized by the state ought to have those possessions returned to them. A couple of things just to note about the Edict of Milan. This makes Christianity a legal religion. However, it does not make Christianity the religion of the empire. That really doesn't come for another century with the Theodosian Code. So if anyone ever tells you that Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the empire, they are wrong. And so it's worthwhile to keep note of how historical developments happen. Also, Constantine still does not publicly come out as a Christian yet, even with the Edict of Milan. He is simply showing himself to be a patron and protector of Christians. This patronage of Christianity can be seen in many ways. For instance, in the year 321, Constantine declares that Sunday is a special day of worship. But it's not even clear in this decree if he means worshiping to honor Christ or worshiping to honor the Son, because both of those things could have happened on a Sunday, and he's ambiguous in his decree on that. Nonetheless, that gives Christians cover to worship publicly and freely on Sundays. In the year 324, there is a civil war that breaks out between Constantine and Licinius, and Constantine emerges as the sole emperor of the Roman world. And it's at that moment, in 324, that he really comes out fully as having sole allegiance to Jesus Christ and to Christianity. So he's really had about a 15-year period of gradually moving towards publicly endorsing Christianity. At this time, Constantine begins an aggressive program of building churches in Rome. If you've ever been to Rome, the most ancient church structures you're going to find, for the most part, are coming from this early 4th century period. He and his mother Helena also began a program of restoring the various holy sites in Jerusalem and throughout the Holy Land. So again, any of the Christian architecture you're going to find in Jerusalem at its earliest level is probably going to be datable to the 4th century. And he begins to build his own capital, Constantinople, in Asia Minor, and what is now called Istanbul, as a way of subverting the pagan Roman senatorial class in Rome. The pagan senators are very upset about Constantine's move towards Christianity, and this is a way for him to marginalize their influence. Constantine becomes very involved in various church disputes, most famously in the Council of Nicaea. He believes that since he is the patron of Christianity, he has some sort of authority for also convening Christian leaders together. So as Eusebius writes in the Life of Constantine, quote, "Like some universal bishop constituted by God, Constantine convened synods of his ministers." Now, some might argue that at this moment is somehow when Christianity becomes irreparably corrupted. I think this is a really inaccurate reading of Christianity. There's clearly a symbiotic relationship between the bishops and Constantine at this point in time, but bishops themselves are still not afraid to exert their own authority. And Constantine never has complete control of the church. In some ways, this blaming of a corruption of Christianity on Constantine has an anti-Roman Catholic piece to it, has a piece of simple discomfort with Christian power, that is often a projection of our own modern issues onto the past. But let's talk about some of the effects that Constantine has on Christianity. Obviously, the most clear one is that Christianity is now a favored religion identified with the state in some way. What does that mean? Clergy are exempt from paying taxes when they had not been before. The army uses Christian symbolism, in particular this Chi Rho symbol. There are coins that Constantine mints that bear the Chi Rho symbol. I placed one of these examples for you on Populi. This is a coin from the year 325. On the face of it, there's an image of Constantine that says, Constantine, the great ruler. On the back is an image of two soldiers standing holding spheres around the coin. It reads, the Gloria Exercitus, or the glory of the army. And if you look really carefully, there is a standard in between the two soldiers, a battle flag, and the Chi Rho symbol is on the standard. And so Constantine, protector of the empire and the glory of the army, and in the middle is a symbol of Christ. That is a very, very different change from, say, Ignatius of Antioch being led away as a martyr, or the death of Perpetua in the Stadium. There is also an explosion in the growth of churches as public buildings. There's a movement out of houses and a process of the taking over of pagan temples as Christian places of worship. Again, if you've been in Rome or other parts of the Mediterranean, you've probably seen examples of this. I have an image also on Populi of a diagram of old St. Peter's Basilica. Basilicas were public administrative spaces that get converted into houses of worship. So Old St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is more or less on the site of the current St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the heart of the Vatican. And you can look at this diagram to see how the Roman administrative space is transformed into a worshiping space. So now Christian churches are public, and they can have public and visible iconography on the outside. So this is now when the image of the cross or other iconography for Christians begins to appear publicly. Furthermore, being a Christian now no longer involves a break with the past, with your former life or greater society. As more and more people want to become Christian, now is a heightened attention to all sort of daily pastoral questions. Questions about how to organize the family, what the ideal Christian household is. There's also questions of ethics. Can a soldier be a Christian? What kind of professions are permissible for a Christian and not permissible? And there's also a heightened need for catechesis, for instruction in the Christian faith. Because as more and more people come in, one has to ensure that all these people really know what they're being baptized into. A final element here is that the church is now in some ways subject to imperial authority. Emperors could examine episcopal appointments. They would seek to have a say in who's appointed as bishop in what regions, especially in important cities like, say, Antioch, Rome, Constantinople. On the flip side, bishops are now becoming advisors to emperors. So whether it's Eusebius of Caesarea with Constantine, or Archbishop Ambrose seeking to be an advisor to later emperors, this dynamic begins to play out, where the church and the state begin to cooperate. And this is then going to help create what we call in European Christianity, Christendom, this condition of the entire society being oriented around Christian assumptions. All this process of Christianizing the empire culminates with a variety of imperial legislation that begins to regulate religious life in the empire to favor Christianity. We see this with the composition of the Theodosian Code made in the year 438, named after the Emperor Theodosius. The Theodosian Code really asserts that Catholic, Orthodox, creedal Christianity is the official religion of the empire. The Christianity of the Councils of Nicaea, of Constantinople, of Chalcedon. This is a process that unfolds over about half a century. So, for example, it's in the year 380 that Christianity is made the official religion of the empire, but it takes several generations for that official status to be really firmly set in place through legal precedent. So, for example, legislation passed in the year 428 tolerates Arians, these heretics, who fell into disagreement over the Council of Nicaea. They're allowed to continue to worship, but they can no longer build new church buildings. Other Christian groups deemed as heretics, like the Valentinians, who are identified as Gnostics, the Montanists, who were a prophetic movement coming out of the region of Carthage, Manichaeans, who were dualists. None of those groups are even allowed to assemble. So if you want to ask, when does Gnostic Christianity end? Well, the year 428 is a good marking point for that, for when their public assemblies are banned. In the year 408, Jewish public festivals are banned. In the year 391, pagan sacrifices are banned. If you want to know when pagan Roman religion ends, it ends in the year 391 when the sacrifices stop being offered publicly. But on the other hand, in the year 423, a law is passed clarifying that no violence against Jews or pagans is to be tolerated if they live in peace with the rest of Christian society. So through these laws and through the passage of time with these laws, you see the gradual tightening of a firmly Catholic Christian identity for the Roman Empire. And this, I think there's some real irony in here, because in the early centuries of Christianity, what we were seeing was pagan imperial punishment of Christians for the failure to enact pagan sacrificial rites or rites for the emperor, to Christian imperial punishment of people for holding the wrong beliefs or for not engaging in the right kind of practices. And the notion of right belief is that word orthodoxy. Wrong belief we could call heterodoxy or heresy. So orthodoxy becomes a really important measuring stick for Christianity in this era, because Christianity is seen as a key vehicle for unity for the empire itself. If Christianity is going to be a source of unity, other forms of Christianity cannot exist on equal footing, like Gnostics or Montanists. And other expressions of religion also can't be on equal footing. So Jews, Manichaeans, various forms of paganism. All those are suppressed in order for Christianity to serve as the singular focus of unity. That's all for this video. In the next video, we'll talk about the events of the Nestorian controversy and how that's going to lead to the Council of Chalcedon.